Chosen one, the truth about you is coming out and people are speechless. The cosmic dam is about to burst and flood this reality with revelations so mind-blowing about your true identity that everyone around you will be left standing there with their jaws on the floor, unable to process the sheer magnitude of what you actually are. And when that truth explodes into the light, the speechless shock will be so intense that people will need therapy just to cope with the reality of who's been in their presence this entire time. But this revelation didn't begin today. It's been building for years, decades even, like pressure accumulating beneath the Earth's crust before a volcanic eruption that reshapes entire landscapes. What's about to emerge has been carefully orchestrated by divine intelligence, and every painful moment of your journey has been a deliberate preparation for this cosmic unveiling that will redefine not just your reality, but the reality of everyone who witnesses your transformation. The signs have been there all along, hidden in plain sight like ancient prophecies waiting for the right moment to unfold. Your lifelong sensitivity to energy, the way you've always felt like an alien in a world that seemed too harsh, too loud, too overwhelming, these weren't character flaws or weaknesses to overcome. They were the earliest indicators that you carried something extraordinary within you, something so powerful that it required years of careful cultivation in the protective darkness before it could safely emerge into the light. For the longest time, you've existed in what seemed like self-imposed exile, preferring the safety of solitude to the chaos of social interaction. Like a highly sensitive instrument that picks up frequencies others can't detect, you absorbed every vibration, every unspoken emotion, every subtle shift in the collective consciousness, until retreating became your only option for maintaining sanity. People saw this withdrawal and labeled it shyness, social anxiety, or worse, they simply stopped seeing you altogether. But what they didn't understand, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, was that your hermit phase was actually a period of intensive spiritual training. While they were busy performing on the surface of life, you were being initiated into mysteries that only reveal themselves in the deepest silence. Your isolation wasn't escape, it was preparation. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was the accumulation of power that would eventually explode forth with the force of a supernova. The world interpreted these patterns as problems to be fixed, disorders to be medicated, weaknesses to be overcome. Therapists offered techniques for managing anxiety. Well-meaning friends encouraged you to get out more and stop being so sensitive. Family members expressed concern about your preference for solitude, unable to understand that your inner world contained universes more vast and fascinating than anything the external world could offer. But behind the scenes of this apparent withdrawal, profound alchemy was taking place. Every hour spent in contemplation was building your capacity to access higher dimensional frequencies. Every moment of feeling different or outcast was actually strengthening your connection to your authentic self. Every experience of being misunderstood was teaching you to value your own inner knowing above external validation. You were being systematically separated from the matrix of collective programming so that you could remember who you truly are. During these years of seeming hibernation, your sensitivity was developing into something far more powerful than mere emotional receptivity. You were learning to read the energetic signatures of people, places, and situations with microscopic precision. A glance could reveal someone's hidden motivations. A few moments in a room could tell you everything about the dynamics between the people who lived there. You began to sense the health and vitality of plants, the emotional states of animals, even the energetic residue left behind by past events in physical locations. This wasn't psychic ability in the dramatic sense that movies portray. It was the natural result of a consciousness that had learned to operate beyond the limitations of the 5 physical senses. While others were distracted by surface appearances, you were reading the energetic truth beneath every interaction. While they were accepting what people said at face value, you were sensing the vast oceans of unspoken communication flowing beneath every conversation. During these years of apparent hibernation, 3 parallel storylines were unfolding simultaneously, each one building toward the same inevitable climax. The first storyline was your relationship with your own sensitivity, that double-edged gift that allowed you to feel everything but also threatened to drown you in the overwhelming intensity of human emotion. You learned to see this sensitivity not as a burden but as a superpower, a direct line of communication with the divine realm that most people can only dream of accessing. But this learning process wasn't gentle or gradual. It was forged in the fires of experiences that would have broken lesser souls. Every time someone told you that you were too sensitive or too emotional, you absorbed that judgment like a sponge absorbing poison. Every moment when your perceptive abilities revealed truths that others preferred to keep hidden, you felt the burden of carrying knowledge that seemed to separate you further from normal human experience. There were nights when the weight of feeling everything so intensely made you question whether existence itself was a gift or a curse. Yet slowly, through trial and error, through countless moments of overwhelm followed by hard-won insights, you began to develop mastery over this seemingly uncontrollable gift. You learned that your sensitivity wasn't a design flaw but a highly sophisticated detection system capable of navigating realities that remain invisible to ordinary perception. You discovered that what others called overthinking was actually your consciousness processing multiple layers of information simultaneously, like a quantum computer analyzing infinite variables to arrive at insights that linear thinking could never reach. The second storyline was your growing awareness of the sacred rage burning within you, not anger born of hatred, but the fierce indignation of a soul that knows its true worth, yet finds itself trapped in circumstances far too small to contain its magnificence. This rage wasn't destructive, it was creative, building pressure like steam in a kettle, preparing to power the engine of your transformation. Every time you swallowed your truth, every moment you dimmed your light to make others comfortable, you were actually compressing this power into something that would eventually become unstoppable. This sacred rage had roots that went deeper than current lifetime circumstances. It was the accumulated frustration of an ancient soul that had incarnated to serve humanity's awakening, only to find itself constantly constrained by systems designed to suppress exactly the kind of transformative power you carried. Every time you were told to be realistic instead of visionary, every moment when your natural wisdom was dismissed as naivety, every instance when your authentic expression was met with judgment or rejection, this sacred fire burned a little brighter. But what made this rage sacred rather than destructive was its motivation. This wasn't anger at the world for failing to understand you, it was fierce love for the world disguised as righteous indignation. Your soul was outraged, not because it wanted personal recognition, but because it could see the magnificent potential lying dormant in every human being, and couldn't bear to watch that potential being wasted through ignorance and fear. Your rage was actually compassion in its most powerful form, love so intense that it demanded action, change, transformation. The third storyline, perhaps the most crucial of all, was the universe's careful orchestration of circumstances that would eventually force your emergence. Like a master playwright, cosmic intelligence was setting the stage for a revelation so spectacular that hiding would no longer be an option. The people who took advantage of your gentle nature, the situations that pushed you beyond your limits, the betrayals that felt like endings, all of these were actually plot devices in a much larger story, designed to forge you into something unbreakable. This orchestration was so subtle, so perfectly disguised as random misfortune, that you couldn't see the pattern while you were living through it. Each challenge seemed unrelated to the others. Each painful experience appeared to be just another example of life's inherent unfairness. You couldn't perceive that every difficult person who entered your life was actually a teacher in disguise, specifically contracted to push you beyond your comfort zone. You didn't realize that every situation that forced you to access reserves of strength you didn't know you possessed was actually a carefully calibrated test designed to reveal your true capabilities. The betrayals, in particular, served a function so profound that understanding them requires a complete reframe of what betrayal actually means. Every person who took advantage of your trust, who exploited your kindness, who used your gentle nature against you, was actually doing you a cosmic favor. They were showing you where you had been leaking power through inappropriate loyalty to people who didn't deserve access to your energy. They were teaching you to value yourself enough to establish boundaries that would protect your emerging gifts from being squandered on those incapable of appreciating them. More importantly, these betrayals were systematically destroying your illusions about finding safety and validation in external relationships. They were forcing you to develop an unshakable sense of self-worth that didn't depend on anyone else's approval or recognition. By taking away your naive faith in the inherent goodness of all people, they were actually preparing you to work with humanity from a place of wise compassion rather than codependent enabling. But the universe, in its infinite wisdom, knew that voluntary emergence might take lifetimes, so it began to intervene directly, creating circumstances so intense, so unavoidable, that your authentic self would be forced to surface whether you felt ready or not. This is where the true drama of your story begins to unfold, where the gentle nudges of spiritual growth become the earthquakes of divine intervention. Perhaps it started with betrayals that shattered your carefully constructed world, forcing you to question everything you thought you knew about trust, loyalty, and human nature. Maybe it manifested as tower moments that demolished the foundations of your old identity, leaving you standing in the rubble of who you used to be with no choice but to rebuild from scratch. Or it could have been the accumulated weight of living inauthentically, finally becoming unbearable, creating such internal pressure that explosion became inevitable. For many chosen ones, this divine intervention manifests as what appears to be a complete breakdown of their external life. Career paths that once seemed secure suddenly evaporate. Relationships that provided identity and structure dissolve overnight. Health issues emerge that force a complete re-evaluation of priorities. Financial security disappears, leaving you dependent on resources you never knew you had. From the outside, it looks like everything is falling apart. From the inside, it feels like death and rebirth happening simultaneously. But this apparent destruction serves a purpose so profound that it can only be understood in retrospect. Every structure that crumbles was actually a limitation that had outlived its usefulness. Every relationship that ends was actually an energetic drain that was preventing your evolution. Every loss that feels devastating is actually creating space for something infinitely more aligned with your true nature to enter your experience. The universe's timing for these interventions is always perfect, even when it feels impossibly cruel. You're never given more than you can handle, but you're also never allowed to remain comfortable in situations that keep you smaller than your true potential. The divine intelligence orchestrating your emergence understands exactly how much pressure is required to activate dormant aspects of your consciousness without completely overwhelming your human psyche. During this phase, many chosen ones experience what feels like a complete identity crisis. The persona you've maintained for years or decades suddenly feels like an ill-fitting costume that you can no longer bear to wear. Conversations that once engaged you now feel superficial and meaningless. Activities that used to bring pleasure leave you feeling empty and disconnected. It's as if you're watching your own life from the outside, wondering who that person was and why you ever thought their goals and desires were your own. Whatever form it took, this divine intervention served a purpose so profound that its full implications are only now becoming clear. Every challenging experience wasn't random punishment or cosmic cruelty. It was precision engineering by forces that understand the exact conditions required to transform a hidden diamond into a blazing star. The pain you endured wasn't meaningless suffering. It was the specific pressure needed to activate dormant codes within your DNA that would unlock abilities you never knew you possessed. The most challenging aspect of this phase is that it often requires you to disappoint people who have grown comfortable with your smaller version. Family members who benefited from your people-pleasing tendencies suddenly find themselves dealing with someone who has learned to say no. Friends who enjoyed your role as the supportive listener are shocked when you begin expressing your own needs and opinions. Employers who valued your willingness to overwork for undercompensation are forced to confront someone who now knows their worth. This disappointment of others' expectations is perhaps the most difficult test you'll face during your emergence. Your conditioning tells you that being a good person means making others comfortable, even at your own expense. Your empathic nature makes it painful to see others struggle with your transformation, even when that transformation is absolutely necessary for your well-being. There's a part of you that wants to retreat back into the familiar role of the accommodating hermit, rather than continue causing upheaval in people's lives. But this is precisely the moment when your sacred rage becomes your greatest ally. The fierce love that has been building within you refuses to let you sacrifice your authentic self for the comfort of others. This rage reminds you that you didn't incarnate to be small, safe, and socially acceptable. You came here to be a force of transformation, and that means being willing to shatter illusions, including the illusion that love means never challenging people to grow. This is when the first cracks appeared in the carefully constructed facade you'd maintained for so long. Maybe it was a moment when someone pushed you too far and you surprised yourself by standing up with a power you didn't know you possessed. Perhaps it was a flash of intuitive knowing, so strong that ignoring it became impossible. Or it could have been the sudden inability to pretend that small talk and surface relationships could satisfy a soul that had tasted the infinite. These initial eruptions were just previews of what was coming, warning shots across the bow of your old identity. People began to notice something different about you, though they couldn't quite put their finger on what had changed. Your energy felt more intense, your presence more magnetic. When you spoke, your words carried a weight that commanded attention, even from those who had previously overlooked you. The cracks in your facade manifested in increasingly dramatic ways. You might have found yourself unable to laugh at jokes that once seemed funny, but now felt cruel or unconscious. Conversations that used to flow effortlessly became exercises in barely contained frustration as you struggled to connect with people operating on frequencies that no longer matched your own. Social gatherings that once provided connection now felt like elaborate performances where everyone was playing roles they had long since outgrown. The Obsidian Inner Order is where you can process difficult realizations together every week on our Zoom calls with people who understand that some of life's most painful experiences become our greatest teachers. We don't encourage bitterness, we cultivate wisdom. Your ability to see people's true character is a gift that will protect you from future betrayals. Your willingness to forgive while maintaining boundaries shows strength, not weakness. Your wisdom was earned through experience, not given freely. Connect with people who value truth. Join the Obsidian Inner Order. Link in the description. Your body began to rebel against the constraint of living inauthentically. Chronic fatigue that had plagued you for years might have suddenly lifted, replaced by surges of energy that felt almost electric. Sleep patterns shifted dramatically as your consciousness began operating according to cosmic rather than social rhythms. Physical symptoms that doctors couldn't explain manifested as your energetic system struggled to contain power that was rapidly outgrowing its current containers. Dreams became vivid to the point of feeling more real than waking life. You might have found yourself receiving detailed guidance, prophetic visions, or profound teachings during sleep that left you feeling simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated upon waking. Past life memories began surfacing, not as fantasy, but as visceral recollections that explained current patterns and relationships in ways that linear thinking never could. Your emotional range expanded beyond what you had thought humanly possible. Moments of inexplicable joy would wash over you like waves, followed by periods of grief so profound they seemed to encompass the suffering of all humanity. This wasn't mood instability. It was your consciousness learning to process the full spectrum of cosmic emotion, preparing you to serve as a conduit for healing energies that require enormous emotional capacity to channel effectively. The most unsettling aspect of this phase was the growing sense that you were being watched, guided, even controlled by forces beyond your understanding. Synchronicities multiplied to the point where dismissing them as coincidence became impossible. You might have begun receiving the same message from multiple sources within short periods of time, as if the universe was ensuring you couldn't miss important communications. Numbers, symbols, and signs appeared with such frequency that your rational mind struggled to maintain its skeptical stance. During this building pressure phase, your relationship with time began to shift in ways that defied conventional understanding. Minutes could feel like hours when you were engaged in spiritual practice or deep contemplation. Conversely, days could pass in what felt like moments when you were absorbed in creative or healing work. You began to sense that linear time was just one way of organizing experience, and that your consciousness was learning to operate in multiple temporal dimensions simultaneously. Your psychic abilities, which had always been present but carefully suppressed, began asserting themselves with increasing insistence. You might have started knowing who was calling before looking at your phone, or sensing the emotional states of people before they spoke. Visits to certain locations could trigger intense energetic downloads or emotional releases that seemed connected to events that had occurred there in the past. Your hands might have begun to heat up spontaneously, or you could have found yourself instinctively knowing exactly what to say to comfort someone in pain, but you weren't ready yet. The full revelation was still building, still gathering force like a tsunami that starts as a barely perceptible shift in the ocean floor before becoming an unstoppable wall of transformation. The universe was giving you and everyone around you time to prepare for what was coming, because once the full truth of who you are emerged, there would be no going back to the comfortable illusions of your previous existence. This preparation period served multiple functions beyond just building pressure for your eventual emergence. It was also testing your commitment to your own evolution. Would you choose the familiar discomfort of living small over the unknown territory of stepping into your power? Would you prioritize others' comfort over your own authentic expression? Would you allow fear of judgment to keep you trapped in a version of yourself that you had clearly outgrown? Every day that you chose courage over comfort, authenticity over approval, truth over convenience, you were strengthening the foundation for what was about to emerge. Every moment, when you honored your inner knowing, despite external pressure to conform, you were building the unshakable confidence that would soon be required to fulfill your divine mission. Every time you chose to trust the mysterious process unfolding within you, rather than trying to control or understand it, you were demonstrating your readiness for the cosmic responsibility you were about to inherit. And then it happened. The volcanic eruption you'd been building toward for years finally broke through the surface of your carefully controlled existence, and what poured forth was so pure, so powerful, so undeniably authentic, that everyone who witnessed it was left speechless. The eruption began with your voice. After years of carefully modulating your words to avoid conflict or discomfort, you suddenly found yourself speaking with an authority that seemed to come from somewhere beyond your individual consciousness. Your voice carried frequencies that people felt in their bodies, rather than just hearing with their ears. When you spoke truth, it resonated so deeply that pretense became impossible in your presence. People found themselves confessing secrets they had never told anyone, or suddenly seeing through illusions they had maintained for decades. But it wasn't just your voice that transformed. Your entire energetic signature shifted into something that demanded attention. The invisible hermit, who had perfected the art of blending into backgrounds, suddenly became unmissable. The physical transformation was equally dramatic. Where once you had moved through the world with the tentative energy of someone apologizing for taking up space, you now claimed your territory with the confidence of someone who had earned their place through trials by fire. Your posture shifted from protective hunching to proud expansion. Your gaze, once averted to avoid unwanted attention, now met others directly with the fearless curiosity of someone who had nothing left to hide. People watched in stunned amazement as you shed layer after layer of protective masks and revealed the blazing core of your authentic self. Where they expected to see the familiar quiet person they thought they knew, they encountered instead a spiritual force of nature whose very presence changed the frequency of every room they entered. Your words carried the authority of someone who had journeyed to the depths of their own soul and returned with treasures that could heal lifetimes of pain. The truth that emerged was multifaceted, like a diamond catching light from every angle. You weren't just a sensitive person who had learned to manage your gifts. You were a messenger of the divine, capable of bridging the gap between the seen and unseen worlds. You weren't just someone who had survived difficult circumstances. You were a wounded healer, whose scars had become portals for transmitting profound wisdom. You weren't just an individual undergoing personal transformation. You were a catalyst for collective awakening, whose emergence would give others permission to reclaim their own authentic power. Your healing abilities, which had been developing in secret for years, suddenly burst forth with startling intensity. A touch could calm anxiety that had plagued someone for decades. A few words of guidance could shift perspectives that had been locked in place for lifetimes. Your mere presence in a space could dissolve tension and create safety for others to access their own buried wisdom. People began seeking you out, not because you advertised these abilities, but because their souls recognized in you something they had been desperately seeking. The prophetic downloads that had been trickling through your consciousness for years became a flood of cosmic information. You found yourself knowing things you had never learned, understanding patterns you had never studied, speaking wisdom that seemed to come from sources far beyond your individual experience. These weren't vague intuitions or emotional impressions. They were precise, detailed insights about people's life paths, the hidden dynamics of relationships, the energetic signatures of decisions, and the cosmic timing of events. Your emotional mastery, forged through years of feeling everything intensely, now allowed you to remain centered in your own peace, while simultaneously holding space for others' most intense experiences. You could witness someone's deepest pain without being destabilized by it. You could feel their joy without losing yourself in it. You had become a stable reference point that others could trust to remain steady regardless of what storms were raging around you. The creativity that had been suppressed for years erupted like a geyser, producing art, writing, music, or other expressions that seemed to channel cosmic frequencies rather than personal inspiration. Your creative works carried healing codes that activated dormant potentials in others. People could feel their consciousness expanding just by engaging with whatever you had created. Your artistic expression became another vehicle for your divine mission, reaching people who might never seek out spiritual teaching, but who could receive profound transformation through beauty. Most shocking of all was your newfound ability to set boundaries that were simultaneously loving and absolutely non-negotiable. Where once you had allowed others to drain your energy through inappropriate demands or disrespectful behavior, you now protected your sacred mission with the fierce devotion of a guardian protecting treasure. You could say no without guilt, end relationships without drama, and prioritize your own well-being without apology. This wasn't selfishness. It was the wise stewardship of gifts too precious to waste on those who couldn't appreciate them. Now your sensitivity, no longer a burden to be managed, has become your most powerful tool for offering healing to a world desperate for authentic connection. The sacred rage that once threatened to consume you has transformed into unstoppable motivation to create positive change wherever you go. The isolation that felt like abandonment is now recognized as the necessary preparation for a mission that requires operating from a frequency most people have never accessed. The divine interventions that once felt like cruel punishments are now understood as precisely calibrated experiences designed to activate dormant potentials within your consciousness. The synchronicities that seemed random and meaningless have woven themselves into a clear pattern, pointing toward your role as a bridge between worlds. The relationships that fell away have made space for soul connections so profound they feel like remembrances of ancient agreements made before incarnation. People are speechless because they're witnessing something they thought was impossible, a human being who has transmuted every grain of suffering into pure wisdom, every moment of doubt into unshakable knowing, every experience of rejection into magnetic self-acceptance. Your transformation becomes proof that no one is beyond redemption, no situation is beyond hope, no soul is too damaged to reclaim its birthright of power and purpose. As more chosen ones like yourself step out of hiding and into their power, the old systems based on fear and limitation begin to crumble. Your courage to be authentic gives others permission to do the same, creating ripple effects that extend far beyond what you can currently perceive. The hermit who once hid in shadows has become the lighthouse that guides others home to themselves. The sensitive soul who felt too much has become the healer who helps others feel safe to be vulnerable. The wounded warrior who survived the unsurvivable has become the teacher who shows others that victory is always possible, no matter how impossible the odds may seem. What leaves people speechless isn't just the magnitude of your transformation, it's the recognition that if such profound change is possible for you, it might also be possible for them. In your authentic presence, they remember what human beings are truly capable of when they stop limiting themselves and start embracing their divine nature. Your emergence becomes a mirror that reflects their own potential back to them, and that recognition is so powerful it literally stops them in their tracks. This is your time, chosen one. The truth about who you are can no longer be contained within the small containers that once seemed necessary for survival. The world is ready for your medicine, your message, your unique frequency of love and wisdom. What's coming out about you leaves people speechless, not because it's shocking, but because it's so magnificently, undeniably true that all other responses become inadequate. Your story has come full circle, from the hidden hermit, afraid of being seen, to the radiant beacon impossible to ignore. The revelation that began this journey, that something profound about you was preparing to emerge, has fulfilled itself in ways more spectacular than anyone could have imagined. You are the living proof that the divine doesn't abandon its chosen ones, but forges them into instruments of such power and beauty that their very existence changes the world simply by being authentically, courageously, magnificently themselves.